Anyone who believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist.
We don't want to focus politics on a notion that involves the rejection of principles around which a large majority of our fellow citizens organize their lives.
We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think.
I wanted, rather than to get stuck down into the mechanics of exactly when who's consulted and so on, I wanted to just raise our sights a bit about what is this all about? Why is the relationship between government and civil society so important to us? About a couple of years ago, my husband and I sat down one evening and watched a marvellous programme, I thought it was marvellous, on BBC 4 called, I think, The Secret Life of Motorways. In fact, it was a series of 4 programmes, and it started off with the bright new dawn of the M1 in the early 60s, and you had the minister cutting the tape, and you had people racing down in their Rovers to see how fast they could go on the M1. Then we went through, the next week of these 4 programmes. The next week we saw the heartbreaking sight of JCBs, or whatever they were called then, digging up the peat to build the M6. Again, the populace absolutely behind this. The lady whose cottage was stuck between the 2 carriageways of the M6, not seeming to complain much. And then by the end, by the 4th programme, we had the sight of the protesters at Twyford Down. We had the bizarre sight of the headmaster of Winchester College, the Bishop of Winchester, the middle-class population of Winchester, Swampy, the road protesters, all gathered together against the idea that there should be the M3 extension through Twyford Down. And as someone with a historical background, I thought to myself, what happened? What happened between the 1960s and the 1990s? How did that change in people's society's attitudes change so much? Sadly, as we know, the cutting still went through Twyford Down, but blimey, they had a go. And it set me thinking about how things change. How do attitudes change? And I am a profound believer that for things to change, ideally for the good, you have to have that perfect combination, of players. If you think about attitudes to roads, it's a bit about individuals, it's a bit about civil society, it might even be a bit about government, it's a bit about events. All of those things need to combine in equal measure to make things change. The position of women in society in the 20th century, I'd say, was the same kind of thing. There's a bit about legislation, sometimes government leading, sometimes following, but it's as much about civil society, individuals all joining together. That, for me, is why there isn't a leader, there isn't a primary player, there isn't a secondary player. To get society to change, everybody has to play their part. That's why I had always wanted to join an NGO. That's why I had looked longingly at Fiona Reynolds' job as Director General of the National Trust, and that's why I was totally delighted that the vacancy arose before I felt I was too tired and old to take it. But that sense that I can now see things from the NGO, from the civil society point of view, is one of the key reasons to help change society through the work that we can do with our reach, with our membership, in partnership with many of the organisations represented in this room. That's why I took this job. That is why I believe the compact that the government made with civil society was absolutely vital. That's why I fully support the Civil Society Advisory Board that Defra set up. But it's got to be real. Civil society has to be involved at all stages in what I would call the policy wheel. What's the problem we're trying to solve? What are the options for solving it? What are the mechanics? What are the practicalities of what we do? Did it work? If it didn't work, how do we make it work better next time? So any advisory group has to be involved in all 5 phases. We believe at the National Trust, larger an organisation though we are, in working in partnership. We've got some really good examples of how we're working in partnership, not only with other NGOs, but also with Defra, for example, on water catchment schemes and in the work on ash dieback. We're very, very concerned and keen that that kind of continued dialogue goes on in some other areas, absolutely key to us. The future of policy on bovine TB, the future of CAP policy, the issues around marine conservation zones, all of those things. For us, the debate has to be a genuine one. It has to be, as I say, at all points in the policy-making cycle, because it's only together, government and civil society and all the other players, that we can make the right choices and change society and the environment in the way we believe.
Let me paint you a picture. What if, across the country, there were many thousands of community organisations supported by many tens of thousands of community activists, mobilising many hundreds of thousands of people as neighbours and citizens in their communities to take action to improve our rural communities, to take action to address the big environmental challenges? And what if these organisations and these activists and these citizens were across the country setting up social enterprises, stimulating local economies, taking over land and buildings, running shops and pubs and libraries and woodlands, providing renewable energy, drawing up neighbourhood plans, building a vision of their community's future and putting that vision in place? Well, it's not what if, it's already there. It's there in the network of community organisations and our partners and associates at Locality, and in all the networks and agencies alongside us, like the Plunkett Foundation and ACRE and many others. It's already there. And what we see is that the appetite to do more is growing all the time. In the last 12 months, for example, my organisation at Locality, we've had over 8,000 requests for advice and support from people who want to use the new powers in the Localism Act to make a difference in their neighbourhoods. So I believe that the resources and the resourcefulness in civil society is much too important to be sidelined, and that therefore the question is not whether Defra should rethink its relationship with civil society organisations, but how and how far you, the Minister, and your department are prepared to go. I would encourage you to be ambitious and not just to recreate the Civil Society Advisory Board for Defra, but to create a body and a way of working that goes to the heart of Defra's operations and can shape its agenda, not simply respond with advice as an afterthought. I understand that Defra want to be seen to be a pioneer within government. I suppose all departments do in some sense. And I believe that there are other examples to learn from. In the Department of Communities and Local Government, DCLG, there's a partnership board. The chair of the partnership board is jointly held by myself, representing civil society organisations, with the senior official, the Director General in that department. We have decided to develop a joint agenda under the theme of communities in control. And please note, this is communities in control, not community consultation, but control of resources, of decisions, of their future. And in this partnership board, what we're trying to do is to shape policies within the department at the outset. The ministers in that department don't just receive advice from their officials, they are increasingly receiving joint advice from third sector organisations, civil society organisations, and the officials working together. And this is a fairly challenging and a very different way of working for that department. But nevertheless, I think an important experiment. So my encouragement would be to ask whether Defra is prepared to take a similar approach. Is the Minister prepared to give civil society the opportunity to shape the agenda with the Minister, with the department? Not simply an advisory role, but in effect putting civil society with the Minister and with the officials in charge of the department.
As many of you know, I have 4 key priorities for Defra: growing the rural economy, improving the environment, not protecting the environment, but improving the environment, and safeguarding the country from animal disease and safeguarding the country from plant disease. So those are my 4 key priorities. And civil society has a vital role in helping to design and deliver the policies to achieve these 4 goals. As part of civil society, you have a huge geographical reach, you have a vast amount of expertise, you understand local issues, and people trust you to take action. And you are potentially the most powerful ally we have to deliver growth while improving the environment. And I want us to work together to achieve this. There are times when we could have done this better. We are paying attention, and we are improving the way we work. An obvious example was last year on our proposals for the nation's forests. It was said that we did not listen or explain ourselves properly. So there will be times when we will have differing views on the best way to make progress. So for these issues, it's even more important that we talk to each other. We need to understand the range of concerns so that we can make the most robust decisions. And that's why I now insist that for all major new policies, we start working with interested parties as early as possible. So, for example, on forestry last autumn, I made sure that in developing our policy, we sought the expert advice of civil society. We did this through a large forestry summit and by involving local people in discussions about the future of their local woodlands. The government's forestry and woodlands policy statement recognised the need to reconnect communities with their woodlands. The Forestry Commission has been working on this with civil society, and this has led directly to the formation of the Woodland Social Enterprise Network, which is now taking forward development of the pilot project. And there are many other examples. On my return from Australia and New Zealand earlier in the year, I was clear that we need to look seriously at biodiversity offsetting. To gather evidence and views, we had a series of informal meetings with NGOs on both sides of the debate. And I've also been to see pilots in the UK for myself, such as the Wrighton Pools Country Park in Warwickshire. As a result, we've just launched a green paper that is a genuine consultation. I really want to hear from a wide range of individuals and organisations, and I want to get as much evidence as possible before taking a decision. There are many examples of Defra and its network working innovatively and successfully in partnership with you. Sometimes, the most effective way for government to empower you is for us to get out of your hair. The best example of Defra employing this approach is the establishment of the Canal and River Trust in July 2012. We transferred the functions, assets and liabilities of British Waterways in England and Wales to a charitable body, the Canal and River Trust. This gives users and communities a much greater involvement in managing their waterways while improving their long-term financial sustainability. The Trust has had a most successful first year, including the recruitment of more than 450 volunteer lock keepers, 17 community canal adoptions, and over 29,000 volunteer days. So in my own constituency in North Shropshire, I've seen the incredible impact that this can have. The Montgomery Canal is being improved by volunteers who travel from all over the West Midlands at the weekends to restore this historic waterway. Sometimes the focus will be on improving communication and raising awareness. An excellent example of this is the If They're Gone campaign, which I launched in March this year. The campaign highlights the threats posed to 4 iconic endangered species: rhinos, elephants, orangutans and tigers. It involves more than 20 wildlife organisations, zoos and safari parks. It'll provide the public with information on the plight of these species and give practical advice on how people's decisions can help save these majestic animals from extinction. Sometimes a successful partnership depends on civil society mobilising resources at the local level, for example in the Big Tree Plant. This is supporting communities to plant 1 million new trees, often in areas of urban deprivation. Working with local organisations has been fundamental to the ongoing success of the project. The Tree Council and others have raised significant amounts of match funding, almost double the 4 million made available from government, and they provided routes to a huge range of community groups. They've helped to ensure the grant application process remains fair and robustly monitored. And frankly, without this extensive partnership working, the big tree plant simply couldn't have happened. I'm particularly pleased with the way we're working together on tackling irresponsible dog ownership. Defra funding helped the RSPCA, the Dogs Trust, Battersea Cats and Dogs Home to run community projects on encouraging responsible ownership. And on microchipping, these organisations are making our policy a reality by not only providing free microchipping, but also using their networks to explain its value. Last autumn, the public's contribution to the ash dieback survey was crucial to identifying disease trees and monitoring its spread. There was an innovative use of technology to make this possible, the Kalara mobile phone app. And we want to build on this through the Observatory project. Civil society will be helping to safeguard the health of our plants. The project starts this autumn, and it aims to develop an early warning system for pest and disease threats to the United Kingdom's trees. This is a partnership between the Forestry Commission and other organisations. And the Woodland Trust and National Trust will use their experience to recruit and train a network of volunteers. Volunteers will support scientists by acting as a first line of response to reports of tree pests and diseases sent in by the public. They will screen and filter reported incidents, enabling scientists to focus on these reports of greatest significance. This is a brilliant example of how civil society can mobilise people in an area of policy which would normally be considered the preserve of specialists. We're building local partnerships in a variety of areas: local nature partnerships, nature improvement areas, and the catchment-based approach. This is the best way of directly involving communities in the management of their local environment. Many of the nature improvement area partnerships are led by civil society organisations with the aim of creating an environment that's better for wildlife and people. Earlier this month, I went to see this approach for myself in the Nen Valley in Northamptonshire, where 25 different organisations are working together to improve the local environment. The catchment-based approach is being rolled out across all of England's 89 river catchments. It'll form the principal mechanism to deliver our national water quality targets. Interested parties from the local area will take part in the decision-making. Looking ahead, I want to build on our success by developing even better and more extensive partnerships. We need to change the culture of both Defra and civil society. And on both sides, I believe the change will be for the better. But the demands and impacts of the change need to be recognised and managed. Our mindset should be that partnership with civil society is critical to the successful delivery of our policies. The department should consider the use of partnerships when developing new policies and programmes, and that will not be applicable in all cases, but the range of delivery options should always include working with you. This will require us to embed the spirit of the Compact, the agreement relaunched in 2010 between central government and civil society, more systematically within the department. So my aim is that Defra sets an example across Whitehall in the way it works with you. I want us to be open, innovative and efficient. The design and delivery of our policies should be transformed through partnership working at national and local levels. I want Defra to be the benchmark in government of how to work constructively with civil society. I want us all to work together to boost the rural economy while improving the environment. And this partnership working can also help safeguard our plants and animals. Ultimately, what I want to achieve is a thriving network at local and national levels. And I'm confident that by pooling our collective goodwill and creativity, we can and will succeed.
It's a legitimate subject for government investment, an investment in its broader sense, to think about the kinds of civil society organisations that can help tackle the big problems in rural areas and in the environment, and to think about what type of investment.
Where would you say, Steve, the biggest deficits are? Where are the areas where, if you were pump priming civil society capacity, where would you say Defra should be looking to? Is it particular localities, particular types of area, particular types of problem?
drawing on the experience we have within our network of community organisations, I think we found that long-term, the best kind of investment is to help capitalise community organisations and build their entrepreneurial and social enterprise and business skills. And I think Defra has a part to play in that.
Secretary of State mentioned that we have to, civil society has to change its culture too. And I think that's a dangerous thing to assume in going into these relationships. Back to the comment I made earlier, we are, in our various ways, civil society. We might be charities or community groups. We're here to do the job we're here to do. And in the end, it's rather like you can't, acquire a tiger cub, not that you could because it's illegal, and expect it not to be a tiger. In the relationship, you've got to expect us sometimes to be tigers. And I think that's what somebody mentioned, the lobbying bill. That's why we find part 2 of the lobbying bill so strange, because actually it's saying you lot who have, this is what you're set up to do, you aren't allowed to do it. Now, that's a very odd way to approach charities. So I think we need to go into any relationship with open eyes. We will sometimes criticise you, as we do, and we'll sometimes support what you do, as we do. And that's got to be the deal.
You've come here to say, let's have a strong deal between government and civil society. And what the audience is saying to you is, OK, we're interested in this deal, but here's a set of things we'd like to put on the table. Capacity building. We'd like to know that this deal isn't about us filling a gap left by government withdrawal of functions. We want to be involved not just in delivery but in design, and we want you to respect the fact that whilst we'll work with you on all this stuff, we also still need to have an independent voice. That's what I think the polite response is to your invitation to work together. So over to you.
We are not going to agree on everything. That's quite obvious. What's so fascinating about Defra is that it affects every single human being every day. So the water in this jug, the food you might be about to eat this evening, the dye stuff which dyed your shirt, the air in the room, the trees outside, everything is Defra. Everyone has a very, very strong opinion about it, which is really good. So we have a massive pool of enthusiasm and potential. We're not always going to agree. In this room, there will be diverse views on a whole range of Defra issues. And we just have to accept that. But what I think we need to do is to have some sort of mechanism, that's why I'm looking for this sort of successor arrangement, that we can tie in. I think what's really important, which I think where it's gone wrong, is where you have not been talked to in advance. Someone mentioned the badger cull. So if you look at the polling before the cull started was very crudely less than a third, bit less than a third pro, more than a third anti, and about a third neutral. So there is no absolutely given truth on this. And there will be people in the room who do not like to hear that. But we have to accept there will be areas of policy where we are not going to entirely agree. But the trick is to talk and to discuss things. So when we're going ahead, and I do think some of the things I mentioned are absolutely brilliant examples. The canals, I think the canals, what we've done on that, has been really successful. And I thought the dog stuff has been marvellous. It's been really, really tremendous the way organisations have worked with us to deliver a real public good.
Do you think Defra does enough to support civil society organisations working in the Defra space to evolve into what may be in 30 years' time the next National Trust?
There are so many different local organisations. I mean, there are massive monster national organisations which are really well established, which are obviously represented here, but an awful lot of stuff is done by tiny little groups on the ground, often starting from scratch. And I mentioned the NEN visit. That's a really interesting project. There's a basis. It's a catchment area of the NEN. It goes from Northampton, takes in a bit of Bedfordshire, and ends up at Peterborough. And it's all around the NEN catchment area. 25 different organisations all working on that. Now, some of them will be picking up pots of Defra money. And that's where, of course, where I'm very enthused about offsetting. If we could get offsetting going, and if there's a building development within that area in Northampton, or a new road, or a new railway, there would be a significant offset which could give a pot of money, and you would have a real serious 25-year plan to really improve the environment. So you could think really long-term, you'd have a guaranteed income stream. And that, I think, would help flush out some of your groups you're talking about. So the 25 different groups there now, as an example, they could get together and sit down and really work out something good and have plenty of time knowing they had an income stream to really get on with our full support. So I think some of those ideas could help bring on the little ones you're talking about. Because it is a real mix. There's a huge, civil society is an incredibly broad expression. So we're talking massive, well-established national NGOs and then tiny little volunteer local groups. And really, we want to work with everyone.